All right, we are live with today's session on smoking cessation. Just going to wait a few minutes until people enter the chat room. While you're waiting, just I guess first give me an indication if you can hear me and see the presentation. If you just want to type yes in the chat box, just to let me know that I'm actually being heard. And good. All right, great. Good morning to you all as well. You'll notice when you logged in, there's a poll question there. So if you could just quickly answer that, just basically what is your affiliation with the CAF community? And then you'll also notice that I shared a number of handouts for today's discussion, including the participant workbook for the Budout program, a contact list for your local contact for health promotion if you are interested in a more tailored approach to the Budout program, because again, these webinars are just more for informational purposes and it's not the full Budout program. And then there's also two other handouts, one Canada's Food Guide and the other the Canada's Physical Activity Guidelines, because today we're going to be talking about weight management, and also physical activity and relaxation will be another part of the conversation. So just take a few minutes, fill out that poll. You can browse through the handouts. I'll add two other poll questions, and I'll just ask that you make sure at whatever point you leave the webinar today, if you could just answer two other questions. The first one, which I'll share with you now, in terms of if you can apply what you've learned today to your daily living. And then the other question, how satisfied are you with this platform? So you don't need to answer those now, obviously, but before you leave the webinar today, just make sure that you click on those questions. So I think we're ready to go. Again, feel free to interact in the chat room throughout the presentation, or if you wish, you can enable your microphone or your webcam and ask any questions along the way. So like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about is weight management, so keeping your weight in check. Just a little disclaimer before we get started. So as with all of these webinars, these presentations, they are the property of D&D, and any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly prohibited. Some of the topics, maybe not so much in this webinar, but other webinars that we offer, the topic could be sensitive in nature, not appropriate for children, so definitely use parental discretion. And you can share stories throughout this presentation. The stories are yours alone to tell. Anything that's shared by participants in this webinar will not be discussed outside of this webinar. So either whether you want to say something in the chat room or on camera. And also this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on. I believe initially they were going to be on the CAF Connection website, but I believe they're creating a YouTube channel for all the webinars now. I don't have the link for that at the moment, but be looking for that if you want to go back to any of the webinars in this series or any webinars that are offered by Health Promotion. So we definitely encourage your active participation, but again, it's entirely up to you. There'll be a few questions I will ask throughout the presentation, so feel free to answer those as we get to them. So hello to everyone, and we'll get started with the first topic, weight management. So as part of this topic, what we're going to be looking at is just some facts about weight gain after quitting smoking. I'm going to ask you the question, why do people gain weight, tips on keeping your weight in check, and then just a little bit of problem solving to prevent weight gain. So the first thing I want to mention, obviously we're talking about quitting tobacco, quitting smoking, and that comes first. The weight gain is secondary. Definitely quitting smoking, it's that most important step towards better health. But there can be some weight gain that does occur. The benefits of quitting are much greater than the risk related to weight gain. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, risk of smoking a pack a day it's equal to the risk of gaining 60 pounds over your ideal weight. So that should be, even though we're going to talk about weight management, quitting smoking should be your first priority. And if you do gain weight, that is normal, but the benefits of quitting smoking far outweigh any weight gain that might occur. Typically, about 4 to 5 people, gain weight when they quit smoking, but this is very temporary. And usually, after 6 months of quitting smoking, people will start to lose any of that weight that they've gained. And on average, people will gain, around 10 pounds or a little less. So I want to ask you then, why do people gain weight after quitting? Any ideas from people who either have quit before, or if you're in the middle of quitting smoking, why do you think weight gain does occur after quitting? Food tastes better, yeah. Need something to keep hands busy. Food is easy to do that. That's definitely true. So those are great answers. There are a few others. Let's see here. Another Chad says, I quit before and I started using snacks to replace cigarettes. And those are definitely all, good reasons as to why people do gain weight when they quit smoking. They sort of fall into two categories. So changing eating habits, which you've all mentioned. And then the second part that I'm going to talk about is metabolic changes that occur. So first off, the changes in eating habits. So it does improve your sense of taste and smell when you quit smoking. And obviously, if things taste better, if things smell better, probably your appetite is going to increase. Your changes in taste preferences. You may want to experiment with other foods that maybe didn't taste so good before, but now you've quit smoking, and all of a sudden, there's a food that you want to eat that you maybe hadn't considered before. It may be, and sometimes people will say, well, it goes to less healthy foods that you maybe didn't like before that now you want to try. Eating does satisfy oral cravings, so definitely smoking does. When you are smoking, it does satisfy that oral craving, but now you've quit, so you need something to replace that, and eating is one way. In addition to keep your hands busy, like Lisa mentioned, it also helps to satisfy that oral craving. Another fact is that it's a loss of a marker for meal termination. So a lot of times, having that cigarette after a meal is two things that people associate together. So if you don't have that marker for ending your meal, then you're more likely to eat more because you're not thinking about or really or having a dessert instead. Yeah, exactly. So instead of having your meal, go and have a cigarette, you might have your meal and have a dessert. So that's a really good point, Lisa. And also, eating does help to cope with those urges to smoke. It gives you something to do until that craving for the cigarette goes away. So that's in terms of changes in your eating habits, what occurs when you quit smoking. Another interesting part is the changes in your metabolic rate. So your resting metabolic rate, as you see in this chart here. So when you're smoking, so the line in the middle, the red line, is your normal resting metabolic rate. And when you smoke, your metabolic rate actually increases. So you'll hear a lot of times people will say, well, smoking helps me to lose weight. Well, the reason behind that, your resting metabolic rate increases when you're smoking. When you quit smoking, it goes down to normal. And then, of course, as you see in the middle, the green bar there, this is a person who has quit and no exercise, so their metabolic rate has decreased. And if you're adding more food than you normally would eat, and your metabolic rate is a lot slower than it used to be, then logically you're going to gain weight. The blue bar there shows that if you add exercise to your quit attempt, your metabolic rate will then obviously increase, and so that can help to keep your weight in check. This graph shows it being almost as equal to smoking. So we're going to talk a bit more in detail about physical activity in the second part of this webinar, but that just gives you an idea as to why weight gain can occur. And so it's, a lot of people do struggle with weight gain, but like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not going to be a substantial amount of weight gain. Less than 10 pounds is usually what people will find on average. And the quit attempt is what's more important, and the weight gain will go away over time. So just again, we'll go into this in more detail in the second part, but if you add exercise, and the reason your metabolic rate goes up, it helps you to burn more calories. Your metabolism, as I mentioned, increases. It helps to curb your appetite, basically giving you something else to do to help curb that appetite. It cuts down on your urges for tobacco. You're trying to replace, and in previous webinars in this series, we talked about finding alternative things to do. So when you get that urge, replace it with something else, and exercise could be something you could replace the urge to smoke with. It helps to reduce stress. So any type of physical activity does help to reduce stress. Cigarettes help to reduce stress. And when you take those away, logically, your stress levels will go up. And so you need to replace that, need to replace that activity with something else that helps to reduce stress. Physical activity being one of them, and we'll talk about a few other things in the relaxation section at the end of this webinar. And it also gives you more energy. Nicotine is a stimulant, and so that will, people get a little bit more energy, a little bit more jump when they smoke. Physical activity, if you're replacing smoking with physical activity, will give you that same energy boost. In terms of eating, what you should be focusing on is eating 3 meals per day. And this follows along with Canada's Food Guide, which I'll reference here in a second. But eating 3 meals per day, spacing your meals 4 to 6 hours apart. Definitely breakfast. I mean, it is true. Breakfast is probably the most important meal of the day. So you should include breakfast every day, and plan for 1 to 2 healthy snacks. So, for example, you'd have breakfast in the morning, then probably about 2 hours later, you should have a healthy snack, and then you have lunch, another snack in mid-afternoon, and then supper in the evening. Now, some people will, some people actually will divide those up into 5 small meals throughout the day. So they're not snacking or having full meals, but smaller meals throughout the day, 5 times a day. But again, keeping your calories in check as well. So that's sort of a general guideline of what you should be following. And as I mentioned, this goes along with Canada's Food Guide. And this maybe looks different if you haven't, this has been out, I think, for a year or two now, the new Canada's Food Guide. So the rainbow is gone. And what is being focused on in Canada's new food guide, as you can see by the plate there, is that half of your plate when you're eating, or whatever your portion measurement is that half of it should be fruits and vegetables. 1/4 should be proteins, so things like legumes, meats, fish, yogurt, things like that contain protein. And then the other quarter should be whole grain foods. So whether that's rice or pasta or breads, that should be the other quarter of what you're eating. And then you should be making water your drink of choice. And that does help to curb smoking as well. So some other things that Canada's Food Guide recommends is that fiber. You should have lots of fiber. That helps to excuse me. That helps to fill you up. Of course, if you're increasing your fiber, you should also increase your liquid intake. So drink more water. Otherwise, you'll become constipated if you increase your fiber and you don't drink more liquids. And you should choose foods with healthy fats instead of saturated fat, because saturated fats increase the bad cholesterol in your body. And actually, the healthy fats, things like olive oil, will help to increase the good cholesterol that we need in our body. So saturated fat, one of the worst saturated fats actually is coconut oil. It has a very high amount of saturated fat and leads to things like heart disease. Although we hear about great things about coconut oil, it's one of those foods that can contribute to a lot of health issues. Be mindful of portions. So again, looking at Canada's food guide, half vegetables, 1/4 protein, and then the other quarter whole grains. And then limiting foods and beverages that are high in calories, such as, that calories, fat, and sugar and salt. So that should be limited as well. In addition, as I mentioned, drink lots of liquids, make water your drink of choice, avoid sugary drinks. Caffeine free should also be an option. And particularly if you, and I guess, well, the last 2 points there, caffeine and alcohol, if you've associated smoking with having a cup of coffee, or if you smoke when you drink typically, because of that association, yes, it's healthier, but you probably want to avoid those things so that you don't have an additional craving to smoke if you are drinking, a cup of coffee, or you are having an alcoholic beverage. So those things should be limited. You'd also want to choose some healthy snacks. And my next slide does have a few suggestions for healthy snacks, but for people who have quit smoking, or just in your general overall health and wellness, what are some healthy snacks that you might have tried, and things that seem to be your go-to when you are having a snack? Again, healthy snacks. I know there's other things you can have as well, but what are some healthy snacks that you might have? Veggies and hummus. Yeah, that's a good choice. I'll just move on to the next slide, and maybe this will give you some other ideas. I'm sure everyone is having other good healthy snacks. Peanut butter on strawberries. That's interesting. I've never, it's an interesting combination. I've never thought of peanut butter on strawberries. But those are two healthy, healthy foods, strawberries and a small amount of peanut butter. I've just never thought of combining them. Carrots and celery, yeah, things like that. So yeah, definitely good examples. Bananas with peanut butter. I've heard of bananas with peanut butter, but yeah, but not with strawberries. So Sharon, that's you're in the same boat that I'm in on that one. Maybe I'll have to give it a try after this webinar and have some peanut butter and strawberries together. So again, choose healthy snacks. As I mentioned, limited calories, saturated fat, sugar, and salt. Raw vegetables, so the celery, the carrots, those sorts of things. Fresh, frozen, and canned fruit. And particularly, although we are going into summer now, but in the wintertime, your frozen fruits are actually, I don't want to say better, but the quality of fresh produce in the wintertime is not as great because it has to come from further distances, and the longer fresh fruit sits in a truck or in the grocery store, it loses some of its nutritional value. So frozen fruits and vegetables in the wintertime are actually have more nutrient value because they're picked when they're ripe, and then they're frozen right away, and it helps to maintain that nutritional content. Plain popcorn, low-fat yogurt, sugar-free mints and gum, all those are good healthy snacks. And I said, well, I guess that's a good point. Lisa mentions that the strawberries and peanut butter together is like PB and J. So yeah, that actually makes sense now that I think about it. So that, there's not a lot to this section in terms of the nutritional part. But just to summarize what I talked about here, it's just that you should definitely pay attention to what you eat. So just recognizing the types of foods that you're having, choosing healthier options. For some people, although we don't, sort of focus on this in the Butt Out program, but some people might want to keep a food diary. When we do other programs in health promotion, like Weight Wellness or Top Fuel for Top Performance, we ask people to sort of keep a food diary or a menu plan. So just so it gives you a better idea of what you are eating, and maybe when you recognize that maybe you're not eating, more healthy options, that you should, replace those less healthy options with something a little bit more healthy. Drink water. So this goes back to the 4Ds that we talked about delay. Drink water is one of the 4Ds, but the other ones include delay. And now I can't remember what the other 4Ds are, but the 4Ds that we talked about in previous weeks include drinking water as part of your quit attempt for smoking. Recognize your triggers that when you eat. So if there are certain situations or things that you associate smoking with in terms of eating, recognize what those triggers are. And then also recognize, what are certain situations, maybe stressful situations where you may eat more, whereas before you would have smoked to deal with that stress. So just, again, recognizing what those triggers are, and always make sure you have healthy snacks on hand. When we do a lot of nutrition courses, we often talk about, making those healthy snacks visible. So putting a bowl of, oranges and bananas out on your table in your kitchen, just making them visible so that they're always there and remind you, that you have something healthy to eat that you can fall back on. So keep those things in mind. I'll come back to a few of these things when we start talking about physical activity in a few seconds, but are there any questions? With rehab, this picture is interesting, but are there any questions with respect to nutrition? So weight management when you are quitting smoking. I'll take the silence as no. So I will move on. Just give me 1 second here just to quickly change the slide presentation to the next one. All right. So the second part, and I mean, obviously physical activity and nutrition go hand in hand. So actually combining the two and eating healthy, keeping your weight in check and adding physical activity while you are trying to quit smoking will increase your chances of staying smoke-free. Doesn't necessarily work for everyone all the time. It may take several attempts, but it will increase your probability of remaining smoke-free, in addition to adding a relaxation plan, which I'll talk about in this section as well. Oh, so we already did the before, so I'll just move on here. So I just want to ask you 2 questions. First off, why is exercise important when quitting smoking? Any ideas as to why it's important? It's a distraction, addressing the boredom, yeah. So those are good answers. And it is part of why, it is important to add some physical activity, some exercise when you are quitting smoking. Is there any type of exercise that is best, do you think? Or are there any exercises that you might have tried in the past to help with quitting smoking? Sharon also mentions reverse effects of smoking on your health, cardio and yoga to relax. Cardio, yeah. I tried push-ups. So yeah, any type of exercises like that do help. There is some evidence actually with yoga, in addition to being a physical activity, because of its relaxation properties. There's a correlation between people having a higher probability of maintaining their smoke-free lifestyle if they combine that with yoga. So that's a really good one to keep in mind. Sometimes, yeah, like Lisa said, sometimes just trying something new. If you're already physically active and doing things, maybe it's just you need to do something a little bit different, add some variety to your exercise regimen. So those are all good answers. It's not that one exercise is necessarily better than the other. It's all about either finding something that works for you or trying something new, like Lisa said. So just some points here about how exercise could assist when quitting tobacco. So it definitely improves your physical health. There's a lot of evidence out there that adding physical activity to your life increases your longevity and helps to decrease a lot of chronic diseases. It also helps to reduce mood symptoms. So it's also a relaxation technique. So when you are stressed out and so forth, then exercise can help to reduce any anxiety or stress that you might be having. It minimizes weight gain. So we saw that in that graph earlier, where if you add exercise, it helps to obviously increase your resting metabolic rate and similar to if you're smoking. So again, replacing smoking with physical activity. It's adding something positive to life. So, we may think of, and maybe when you're first starting to exercise, it may seem a bit, there are some aches and pains that are going to occur, and you may sort of lose some motivation to exercise. But if you keep with it, it has, definitely some positive effects, and adding something that's positive to your life, especially if you're going through a lot of stress. And on top of that, quitting smoking, which can increase that stress, you want to add something positive. It provides you with a new focus, particularly if you hadn't done a lot of exercise before. It gives you something else to look forward to, something else to focus on rather than smoking. And exercise, because it does help to reduce mood symptoms, helps with your mental health. It can help you to concentrate as well. So those are all things to consider with respect to exercise when you're quitting smoking. This next slide is a little bit of a repeat from the weight management one, but again, we already talked about it being quitting tobacco leading to weight gain because of the improved taste, the oral cravings. We've talked about alternatives in previous weeks. Eating is an alternative to smoking, but of course there can be weight gain that goes with that and the metabolic changes that I mentioned. So adding exercise will help with a lot of that weight gain because it helps to burn calories. The boredom, the tension that goes with that, it's an alternative. Raises your metabolism, and it can help to suppress your appetite. So what exercise is best? There are 3 different types of exercises that you can engage in. Again, I'm not saying anyone is the best, but you could engage in endurance types of activities. So that provides more activity for your heart and your lungs. And there are a number of programs out there, one with the Cancer Society, Walk and Run to Quit. And the reason being, in addition to increasing your metabolic rate, when you are combining either walking or running with your quit attempt, you see the improvements in your lungs and in your heart a lot quicker if you combine your quit attempt with physical activity. So that's a good one to choose. Strength activities as well, so resistance training, help to strengthen your muscles and your bones. And then any type of flexibility or breathing type training. So anything from gentle bending to stretching, just to keep your muscles relaxed and your joints a little bit more mobile. In terms of endurance, are there any activities? I already mentioned like walking and running, but any other types of endurance activities that people have engaged in? Perhaps in combination with your quit attempt, or things that you might like to try? Biking, yeah. So biking, walking, running. Let's go on to the next slide. There's a whole list of them here. Walking, golfing, just doing yard work. You don't have to necessarily be engaged or in some type of activity where you're going to the gym or something purposeful. It can just be doing yard work. Cycling or biking, skating, swimming, tennis, dancing, all of these are good examples of endurance activities that you could combine with your quit attempt. What about strength activities? What are some things that you might have tried? Or maybe you haven't. I'll put the list up here. Yeah, resistance training. Yeah. So, well, we've gone from yard work to heavy yard work. So something that involves a little bit more lifting. And again, it doesn't have to be anything necessarily new that you're doing. You mentioned like lifting, carrying groceries, something like that. Sit-ups, which someone mentioned earlier, or sorry, push-ups, pull-ups. Actually, sit-ups. A lot of the in fitness instructors with NPSP would not necessarily recommend sit-ups because of the extra strain on the back. So doing more things like push-ups, pull-ups, or planking, those sorts of things would be more recommended than a sit-up these days. Carrying books, backpack. Chad mentioned hiking. Hiking would be more endurance unless you are, say, carrying a heavy backpack. Then that would be more of a strength building type of activity. Perhaps even, you know, if you combine your hiking with rock climbing, then that would definitely be a good example of a strength building activity. And then again, any type of weight training, strength training, resistance training would all be good examples of strength building activities. And then finally, we have the flexibility and breathing activities. And you've already mentioned some examples of this, but yoga, Tai Chi, dancing, just doing ball exercises, any type of stretching. Pilates, yeah, would be a good example as well. And so yoga has shown, as I mentioned earlier, some benefit in assisting with quitting smoking, because not only does it have the physical activity component, but it also does have a relaxation component. Now, some forms of yoga are a little bit more active than others, but a form of yoga like, say yin yoga, Y-I-N, yin yoga, combines, you know, the relaxation part as well as stretching together. And depending on the yoga studio or where you do your yoga, some of them also have essential oils that help to calm and whatnot through a diffuser in the room as well. And so anything like that that helps to sort of calm your mood, but then also helps with any stretching or relaxation is beneficial. So those are just some examples of those types of flexibility and breathing exercises that you might do. And breathing as well, I mean, it can be meditation. Meditation could be something as well if you're adding in breathing into that flexibility type of activity. So those are just some examples there of the different types of things you could engage in when you are adding physical activity to your quit smoking attempt. There are a number of guidelines, and I did forget to mention in the last presentation, there is a copy of the food guide and the handouts there. I mentioned it at the beginning, but just to remind you, there's also a copy. I'm getting ahead of myself. Or maybe I don't. I'm looking at two versions of the presentation here, and these slides aren't in the one I'm looking on the other screen. But anyway, let's just talk a little bit about moderate versus vigorous intensity activity. And I think those two slides are hidden in that presentation. If you were to go to the handouts, so in the handout, you'll find Canada's Physical Activity Guide. So that slide should have appeared. But anyway, you can refer to the Physical Activity Guidelines handout that I provided. And what it says on that Physical Activity Guideline is that whether you're quitting smoking or not, what every adult between the age of 18 and 64 should strive for is to accumulate at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic physical activity per week in bouts of 10 minutes or more. So that's just in general what's recommended for people. And then when they talk about intensity, so moderate intensity would be something like a brisk walk or bike riding, whereas vigorous intensity would be something like jogging or cross-country skiing. It's also beneficial, as it says in that physical activity guideline, to add muscle and bone strengthening activities that we talked about that use all the major muscle groups, and that should be something that's done at least 2 days per week. And then it also says in the physical activity guidelines that more physical activity provides greater health benefits. So I think that's probably obvious. But again, if you have been smoking for a long period of time and you're thinking of adding physical activity to your routine, to your daily routine, probably you want to talk to a physician first to make sure the intensity of activity you should be engaging in, particularly if maybe you haven't been engaged in a lot of physical activity previously. So while these are all good recommendations in the physical activity guidelines, consult a physician, particularly if you haven't been engaging in a lot of physical activity. So there's definitely the benefits of adding physical activity are immense. It helps to reduce the risk of premature death, heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, all the things that you see listed there. It helps with and leads to improved fitness, strength, and mental health as well. Exercise is medicine. It definitely is. It is something that should be prescribed by doctors. Now, having said that, we just had a professional development session a couple of weeks ago with our injury prevention and physical activity team in Ottawa, and I did not know this, but doctors cannot bill for, and it says exercise is medicine there. They cannot bill for talking to a patient necessarily about physical activity or prescribing physical activity. So they don't usually talk about it. Now, some doctors get around that by saying it's a health consultation session, and they talk about physical activity. But a lot of times your doctor will not talk about how physically active you are or adding physical activity to your regimen because they're not able to bill for that time where they talk about that. So I think that's interesting. It was a doctor who gave the professional development session to us. And because it can't be billed, a lot of doctors will not talk about it. So just a little something to keep in mind there. So that is physical activity. Any questions about physical activity, the combination of physical activity and improved nutrition to help with quitting smoking? All right. I'll move on to then the final part of today's webinar, which is relaxation. I agree, Sharon. It is hard. It is very sad and surprising to hear that doctors can't bill for suggesting or talking to a patient about physical activity. So relaxation. I'm going to ask you a question. So why is it important to have a relaxation plan when you are quitting smoking? So we talked about nutrition, we talked about physical activity, and you can definitely have plans for those, but why is it important to also have a relaxation plan? Any ideas at all? All right, I will just, well, let's see, quitting smoking, it is stressful. Yeah, it is definitely stressful. A lot of people use smoking to cope with the stress in their life. So now you're taking that away, so you need to find other ways to relax. So that is why it's important. Lisa says it's best to have a calm mind to cope with smoking reduction or quitting. And definitely, if because your stress will definitely increase when you quit smoking, you need to replace that with something else. So as this slide says here, with quitting, many people lose that stress management strategy. Smoking has become the stress management strategy. And that in itself, just the act of quitting, like Sharon said, quitting is a stressful event. So it can make people edgy and just add another source of stress to your life. So what's happening here is that you have a stressful situation. So whether it's an argument with your partner, your landlord won't fix your plumbing, your son or daughter comes home with a bad report card, and then in your mind, and we talk about this a lot in our stress take charge course, that it isn't necessarily the stressful situation that's causing the stress. It's that second part, that self-talk that is going on in your head. So, if you have an argument with your partner, you might say, oh, I never win. And that just increases your stress. Or, someone won't fix your plumbing. You're thinking, oh, nobody cares about me. Or if your daughter brings home a bad report card, you're thinking she's not trying hard enough. So that self-talk is what's causing the stress. And it creates a body response of, it could be knots in your stomach, tension in your shoulders, headaches. So then you add in the fact now that you're quitting smoking, and you can see where some of those thoughts will creep in to your mind. And last week we did talk about some of that thought stopping, how you can change that, those negative thoughts into something more positive to help with your quit attempt. Another way of looking at it is trying to sort of look at the things that you can avoid or prevent that increase stress. There's going to be some things that maybe you can't avoid altogether, but you can reduce them so that it's not as stressful. And then there's other things that you can adapt, that are just going to happen. You can't eliminate them, and you need to find coping mechanisms to deal with that stress. So the first one is avoiding. So avoiding stressful situations. So how do you avoid stressful situations? Ways to prevent things from becoming more stressful and avoid them is to basically don't go to work. No, don't. don't do that. Still go to work, but if that is the source of your stress, then maybe that is more of the altering and adapting to the situation, because we can't avoid that. Sometimes we do have unrealistic expectations, and that creates stress. So maybe lower your expectations of things that are going on in your life. Maybe avoid urgent thinking, and you can avoid urgent thinking, or things that are need to be addressed, but are causing a lot of stress, by planning your time a bit more effectively. So rearranging things that to eliminate those irritations, being more on top of whether it's work or things at home, or setting out schedules or planning your day, even right down to the hour. That does, yes, take a little bit of time, but it can definitely go a long way, so that things that are happening don't become as stressful, so you're avoiding them if you're taking more time to plan. Now, if you're at home and you have other people that are causing you stress, or maybe other people who are smoking, try to encourage cooperation from others to help to avoid those stressful situations. So let them know. We talked about last week about being very assertive with people, letting them know that I'm trying to quit smoking. I'd really appreciate if you could help me with this, or try to help me to avoid things that might cause stress in my life while I'm going through this, to hopefully encourage their cooperation. So those could help in terms of avoiding stressful situations, but definitely keep going to work. Don't avoid work altogether. um, altering stressful situations. So this will help to reduce. So things that you can do here, yes, there's things that are going to happen that are going to cause stress, but don't sweat the small stuff. Little things that we get stressed out about. Maybe I don't know, our clothes are wrinkly. That stresses us out. Or someone says something to you that makes you mad, or you're in traffic and someone cuts in front of you. Those are little things that we really don't need to stress ourselves out about. Don't blame others or yourself when things go wrong. That's sort of that mind, in your mind, that you're thinking about and interpreting things in a way that you're trying to focus blame on either yourself or others as to why things are happening. Try not to become overwhelmed. So, if you have a big job to do, break it down into smaller parts, and that will help to reduce some of the stress. You can't eliminate it, but if you break it down into smaller parts, that will make it a little bit more manageable and will help you to reduce some of your stress. Get along with people. That can be a little difficult if there's certain people that maybe you work with, there's certain people in your life that maybe get on your nerves. But look at it as that's more on them than it is on you. And if you try to get along with them, then that'll help to alleviate some of the stress that you have. Maintaining balance in your life. This is a big one that we talk about a lot, and I've done a number of webinars with the student pilots in Moose Jaw with our mental performance manager there, and that work-life balance, or for them, the students, the school life balance is sometimes hard to maintain. Separating work from your personal life and making sure you're spending an equal amount of time studying or at work as you are on personal issues is very important. So trying to maintain that work-life balance is something that should be focused on. And then finally, coping mechanisms. So how do we adapt to things we can't avoid or we can't alter, and we just need to find a way to cope? So it's all about keeping perspective. How serious is the situation that's happening? Is it something that is going to alter your life altogether, or is it something that you can deal with and find a way to cope with that stressful situation? Cultivate diversion. So finding alternative things to do to help you build up sort of resilience to deal with stressful situations. Change activities temporarily. So perhaps you need to step away. If something's stressing you out, it's no good to just keep working at it, and that's just going to make you more stressed. So maybe you just do something different, or step away from it altogether for a temporary amount of time, and then come back to it. Other things that will help you cope and build up your resilience to stressful situations: getting enough sleep, so getting that 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night definitely has positive benefits. Exercise, which we've already mentioned, and then relaxation. So practicing, whether it's breathing or yoga or meditation, any types of relaxation can help. And then just avoid any self-destructive coping behaviors. Obviously, with this program, we're talking about quitting smoking. That is a self-destructive coping behavior that you should avoid. But then also, if you're drinking or anything else that is destructive and isn't improving your health, are things that you should avoid. So the final few slides here, I just want to really focus in on relaxation. We've already talked about why it's important, but it's important, but it isn't something necessarily that you should jump into right away. When you are quitting, it is something that you should practice and find something that works for you even before you start to quit. Now, some of you may already started quitting, and that's great. But if you're looking to add relaxation techniques, you might want to try a few things out. Look at, and maybe look at a few things and write them down and say, I want to try yoga, I want to try meditation, I want to add, some light exercise to help with relaxation. And then sort of try some of those things out that work best for you as a relaxation technique. So create that menu and then sort of practice each one. Everyone can benefit from relaxation when you're quitting tobacco. I mean, in general, everyone should practice some form of relaxation. Are there any types of, we've already mentioned some, but any other types of relaxation techniques that you think would be useful when you're quitting smoking, or things you might have tried before? Calming music, yeah, for sure. Again, it's what works for you. Yeah, calm.com is a good one. I think there's they have a number of YouTube videos as well for progressive muscle relaxation. What's the other one? Well, grounding meditation. Mindfulness, that's the word I was looking for. They have mindfulness meditation. Yeah, there's a lot of good things there. They have bedtime stories as well. If I'm thinking of the right one, calm.com. So there's a lot of different things there that can help with relaxation. So again, there's a lot of different things you can do, a lot of different techniques to choose from: physical activity, breathing, even just simple breathing. If you are in a stressful situation, and just taking a couple minutes to take a deep breath in and then a deep breath out, that helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system in your brain and will sort of produce those chemicals in your brain that promote relaxation. So just, you're stressed out. Maybe we're probably more so working from home now, although things are a little bit more restrictions being lessened. If you are feeling stressed out sitting in traffic, for example, instead of taking your anger out on the person that's caused you some stress in traffic, you might want to just sit there and just take in a few deep breaths and try to relax. Progressive muscle relaxation is another technique that's used, just making you aware of how your muscles are either tense and if they are tense, how you can focus on your muscles to relax them. Stretching is important as well, and that will help with relaxation. Taking time for yourself. A lot of times we don't take time for ourselves and really focus on what we need, and doing that, and organizing your life and taking that time and just, that me time is important. And then taking time to laugh, just whether it's, laughing at something funny that you're watching or listening to, or just laughing at yourself. Maybe you've done something really silly and, it's, you just laugh about it rather than really get stressed out about it. So definitely these are things you can do. There's a lot of other things, the music, which Sharon mentioned. So anything that works for you that helps to calm you down is something you should employ. And you can write this all down as you can with your eating, as you can with your physical activity, just a plan. So what is your relaxation plan? The things you'll practice, where you'll practice them, and when you'll do them. So just setting out a plan for relaxation. And again, you could do this for physical activity. You could do it for nutrition as well. So that pretty much brings me to the end of the presentation. Are there any questions about anything I've talked about here today? All right, I'll take that as a no. I'll just put this, whoops, I'm clicking on the wrong one. These are just some, I'll just leave that up there. We put this at the end of all our presentations, just some COVID-19 resources. Don't forget before you leave the presentation room here to fill out or to answer those 2 poll questions as to if you think you can apply what you learned today, and then also the other question if you were satisfied with this platform. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I just like to thank you for participating today and listening to what I had to say about physical activity, nutrition, and relaxation. There are 2 more sessions coming up next Friday and the Friday after on quitting smoking. And the topics are kind of open as to what we'll talk about. So I was thinking next week of talking about vaping. Because there's a lot of controversy around vaping, that it could be used as a smoking cessation aid, but then there are also a lot of negative health effects of vaping. So I think that'll be a topic that I'll address next week, and basically then leave the conversation open to any questions you might have. So with that, thank you very much. And again, thank you for participating, and enjoy the rest of your day. You are welcome. Enjoy the rest of your, I guess, have a good weekend as well, I should say. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a good weekend. Yes, it is very sunny here today. It's always sunny in Moose Jaw. All right, with that, I'm going to end the session. So again, enjoy your day, and we'll talk soon.